Hi there, my name is Pandora. This is a video on how to create a triangle or star foam card in Inkscape 0.47, and with much gratitude to Louise and Mary from Time Machines Forum, who helped me wrap my brain around equilateral triangles. So let's get started. At the moment you can see over here in the layers palette I have an introductory text layer, and I want to keep that in case I have to do this all over again, and it wouldn't be the first time I have to re-record something. So I'm going to come down to the plus button, click on that and create a new layer, and the add layer palette arrives. Since it's already highlighted, I'm going to call this my base layer and click on enter on my keyboard. I'm going to use the eye here to switch this layer off. I've already locked it so I can't actually affect it, so I'm going to switch it off because I don't need it. Now, because I'm going to be working in a 30cm card and it really won't fit on this screen, I'll just zoom out a bit. You can see that this is the A4 page that I would normally be working in, but because I don't want that at the moment, I'm going to come up here. There are a couple of ways you can do this. You can either click on this button here and it'll edit the properties of the document. So here you can see I'm working at A4. I'm actually eventually going to cut it from a piece of 12 by 12 paper. So just to make that sorted, I'm going to come down here, click on inches here. I'm going to leave the default to centimeters because confusingly I'm going to work in centimeters. But just to set the page for later on, I'm going to say 12 by 12. And that will now set the page so that it's a 12 by 12 page when I come back to it. I'm actually just going to switch it off for the moment so it doesn't cause any more confusing lines, and close that. Now, there are a lot of ways for drawing equilateral triangles, but the simplest one I found in Inkscape is to come up to the word extensions, the drop-down menu, come down to render, and then way down the bottom of render it says triangle, and this dialog box will come up. Now, the default seems to come up as 100 pixels per size, and I can't remember what the default was, but what you need to do in order to create an equilateral triangle is have 0.5 in each of these boxes. So 100 in the top three, 0.5 in the bottom three, and if I click on this little tick mark here, it'll say live preview, and there, just below here, you can see we have an equilateral triangle. If you want to make it bigger to start with, let's just switch off the live, and if I change this 100 to 700 in each case, and I was playing around with this, so this is, I think, about, so I put that 700 in and click on live preview. Now we get a much bigger triangle. So we'll start with that. I'm going to click on apply and then click on close, and now we have an equilateral triangle. If I click on it, up here on the toolbar, you can see that it currently is 19.81 centimeters by 17.165. So the first thing I'm going to do is come between the width here and the height here and click on the lock, because I want to maintain proportions. So whenever you're going to change the size of something and you want to keep it in the same proportion, switch this lock on, and it's the same thing as keep proportions in scale if you use that. Now, because the three sides are all the same, all I need to do is change the width, because that's the base, and that will change the others for me. And if I type in 30 and press enter on my keyboard, we now have a 30cm triangle. And if you want to kind of work that out, if you come over here to the X value here and just type a 0 and 0 in the Y, you can see we're starting on the Y value of 0, we're starting on the X value of 0, and if you look here, you'll find we're coming to 30 centimeters. The height won't be the same because of the slope of the triangle. So what we want to do now is just zoom in so we can see it as big as possible, and that's my triangle sitting there. We now need to create for the star an interior triangle that's the opposite way up, and the simplest way to do that is to, while it's selected, press Ctrl plus D on the keyboard, and that will duplicate the path. You'll see that more clearly in a second. While it's still selected, and before I do anything else, I'm going to come down here, I'm going to right click, so that I bring up this little dialog box and say set stroke, and now I've turned it blue. Now we want to take this down to half the size of the one that we've currently got. So if I come up to the width box again, press 15 and then enter, we now have an equilateral triangle that's half the size of the one it was. And if I click on both of them, I've got both of them selected, I can come up to the top bar and click on my align and distribute items, and let's just move everything over here a bit so we can all see it a bit closer. So over here we've got relative to page or relative to each other. I'm going to say relative to last selected, and I'm going to use the center objects horizontally. Now that's placed the second triangle centered on the bigger triangle. So that's the next part of it. And what we need to do then is to come to deselect both of them, select the smaller one, and without moving it in any way, come up to the button on the toolbar that says flip selected objects vertically. And now you can see we have two triangles, the bigger 30 centimeter one and the smaller 15 centimeter one. Before I go any further, what I want to do is to move this triangle to another layer. So first of all, I'm going to close my Align and Distribute palette, and I'm going to click on let's just move this up so it's easy to spot together. Make sure I'm selected on the base layer here, and click on the plus button, and when the dialog box comes up, I'm going to call this my topper layer, and click on Add. I'm going to select the inner triangle, and then I'm going to come up to the layer drop-down menu and say Move Layer to Selection Above. Now we'll know if we've done it correctly, because if I click on the eye for the topper layer, it disappears. So if I switch it on or off, you can see. Because I don't want to work on the base layer anymore, I'm going to lock it, but I'm going to leave it in place just so I can see it. And we're now on the topper layer. And this is because we're going to create the items that will decorate the card once we've made it. So we've got this particular triangle, and we need to make some more triangles for here, here, and here. They're actually going to be 10 centimeters, these smaller triangles. So what I'm going to do is to press Ctrl plus D again to duplicate it, come down to the color bar, and I'm going to right click to bring up the little dialog box and left click to say set stroke. And now we have a red duplicate on top of the blue one. And we're working on the topper layer, not the base layer. Again, I'm going to change the size of this, but first what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up and I'm going to flip object vertically. And that will, so you can see we've now got this flipped the other way. So I now want to set it to 10 centimeters, so I'm going to come down here and just enter 10 in the width and press enter on my keyboard. And just to line it up, because I know I lined the larger one at 0, if I enter 0 into my X, it'll automatically set it to this corner here. We need another one for these other two corners, so if I press Ctrl C and Ctrl V, so cut and paste, in other words, some people do edit copy, edit paste, I like to do the keyboards for certain things, and I'm going to line that up in this corner, and then Ctrl V again because it'll remember what we were up to, and I'm going to line this one up in this corner. So we now have our toppers, and we can also start to create our fold lines. Some people, however, may want to also use some separate decoration for these three areas surrounding this central triangle. So if you want to do that, I think the easiest way to do it is simply to come across, select the square, and I'm going to just click and drag a square inside here. And let's just zoom in a bit on this. That's a wee bit too far. Come out a little bit. So what I want to do here is, while this is selected, I'm going to go to Path, Object to Path, because I want to use the node editor to change it. And the second button down is the Edit Path by Nodes. If I click on that, you can see there's a node here that's highlighted. When I point it turns red. And what I'm going to do is click and drag that across so it's the right shape and size for this area. Let's zoom out again. So we just zoom out and zoom out for the page size. Come in just a little bit, so we try and make it big so you can see what I'm up to. So I now have one parallelogram there. I need two more, one for here, one for here. Well, again, what I can do is use Control plus C because it's already selected, Control plus V, which will paste it. And if I now hold the Control key down, and if I click on it once and hold the Control key down, once these little arrows at the corner here appear, while I'm holding the Control key, if I click and drag, right, it will turn at 15-degree implements, and then you can see it's more or less in the right way. However, because of the shape of this, it needs to be the other way up. So again, I can come across here. So what I can do is come up and say flip vertically, and that will change it around so it actually works for this side perfectly well. If I line that up there. And then if I go Control plus C and Control plus V, and I use the flip horizontally, I should be able to grab this and move it across here. Now I'm just going to zoom out a little bit and get my select tool. And because I'm working on the base layer and I'm working on the top layer and I've locked the base layer, I can just click and drag around all of it. And what I'm going to do is, for the sake of harmony, I'm going to turn them all blue so I know what they all are, and say, OK, right click to bring up the dialog box, left click to set stroke, and now I have lots of blue pieces there. So that's all well and good. However, what I actually need is also some fold lines. So I'm going to create yet another layer, and I'm going to click on the plus button here. I'm going to stay with the topper, click on the plus button, and I'm going to call this fold lines. So in order to make the fold lines, the first thing I want to do is to collect on this central triangle so that I can use that as the base for a fold line. So if I select on it, if one of these equilateral triangles gets in the way, just click and drag it out of the way for a moment and make sure you select the central triangle. Use Control plus C, and then what I want to do is switch off the topper layer so I can't see it and lock it. Make sure I go onto the fold layer. You can see it says fold lines, and then I'm going to go up to edit and paste in place, and that will ensure that this is centered exactly over the lower part of the image. So again, I'm going to come down here and set the stroke to red, so these I'll know are my fold lines as opposed to the blue, which are my pieces. And again, what I want to do actually is now make sure that I can see the other smaller triangles. So I'm just going to switch them on. I'm not going to worry about that parallelogram sitting there. What I want to do is trace a line over here, here, and here for our fold lines. So I'm going to come across here, click on the Bezier tool, click here at the beginning, and while holding the Shift key down on my keyboard, come across and then double click, and this will ensure I get a straight line. Now I can see actually I've managed to do that incorrectly, so let's just do it again. I click on this end, hold the Shift key down, and then double click when I get to that end. I'm going to come to this point, single click here, hold the Shift key down, double click there, and single click here, come to here, and double click there. And if I switch off the topper by closing the eye, you can see that, oops, and change back to the select tool, you can see now we've got the fold lines. Now I've had a request to actually show some of the cutting that I do and the embossing, so I'm going to make another quick video, hopefully, and show that part to you, including rearranging the topper layer. See you in a moment.